I simply lit a stick of incense inside the prison, and the global tycoons panicked. They called emergency meetings in the middle of the night across the world. Even the prison warden, a man who had killed countless people, knelt down in terror to pray. All because the incense I burned was different from anything a normal person would use. Just last week, I was a senior in college with my whole life ahead of me. Was I really willing to sell my soul for this? The Kunlun jade pendant hung heavy against my skin. I remembered washing it carefully, a hidden treasure tied to my leg. How did I end up sentenced to death? Locked away in this miserable cell like a common criminal. Since entering this hellhole, I dedicated every second to studying ancient bronze books. I knew my only hope for redemption was hidden within those weathered pages. I found half a pack of cigarettes in a crack in my bed frame and remembered a Taoist ritual. The smoke began to spread, drawing the eyes of 7 dangerous cellmates, including a massive brute. A middle-aged man named Diana approached me with a mocking smile. I ignored him, stuck 3 cigarettes into the incense ash, and bowed with deep respect. I watched the tobacco burn down at an impossible speed while the ancient book of Broy glowed. It trembled inside my mind, and I knew my gamble had paid off. Infuriated by my silence, the middle-aged brute lost his temper. He swung a heavy hand to slap me, but I dodged him with ease. The blow missed me by a hair a second later. I didn't hesitate and kicked the middle-aged man straight to the floor. The brute struggled to get up, leaning over to rip a metal post off the bed frame like a club. He met my icy stare and hissed, "Wanda Wo, you're a dead man tonight." The guard in the watchroom heard the commotion and rushed to the cell door. "Do you have any idea who this newcomer is?" he barked. "Next time, you're all going to solitary confinement." Wanda Wo looked at me with shock, asking how I knew his name. I ignored him again and went back to fixing my bed while the guard's warning hung in the air. He didn't dare act recklessly again, but I could see him plotting his next move. I lay down on the bed and focused every ounce of my attention on the ancient book in my mind. Burning that incense had actually awakened the bronze book, which now radiated an aura of ancient power. The front was shrouded in a thick layer of mist, while the back was covered in rusted, ancient patterns. When I kicked Wanda Wo down, the mist dissipated, revealing his entire past and future right before my eyes. The moment the bronze book fully awakened, I realized its true name, the Book of Life and Death. No creature in this world can escape the records written within its pages. But there was one exception. I couldn't see my own trajectory, my own past, or my own future. My fate remained obscured by the mist, chaotic and impossible to read. I also discovered that this book held every cultivation technique and magic lost to the river of history. One technique caught my eye, the devouring immortal scripture, a path to consuming everything. Any substance with energy would work, and the dense energy in this prison was the perfect fuel. Without even realizing it, I cultivated until the dead of night, when a creaking sound echoed from the next bed. Wanda Wo's expression was twisted in extreme pain, his breathing heavy and ragged like a wild wind. I only realized I hadn't slept at all when the first faint light of dawn filtered into the cell. But I didn't feel tired. Instead, I felt more powerful than I ever had before. The other 6 prisoners woke up at the morning signal and began their routine. They washed up mechanically and folded their blankets into perfect squares. One prisoner, who was on decent terms with Wanda Wo, noticed he was still in bed. He gave the motionless body a gentle pat, and Wanda's corpse immediately slid to the side. A scream erupted in cell 56, and the guard, Wu Xiaocan, came bursting in. A medical examiner in a white coat arrived shortly after to inspect the body. The preliminary report pointed to a heart attack, which was already noted in his medical file. Still, they couldn't rule out other causes and began questioning everyone in the cell. My cellmates watched in silence as they hauled Wanda Wo's body away. I could see the sheer panic taking root in their hearts. Wu Xiaocan called over a colleague to assist with the interrogations. They started asking simple questions to all 7 prisoners, including me. "That kid is a freak," one inmate whispered. "He's not a fortune teller. He's a demon who knows the dark arts." "Officer, you have to move him," another pleaded. "He sits cross-legged all night without sleeping. It's terrifying." Wu Xiaocan and his partner traded a look, fighting to keep their expressions neutral. They were professionals, trained not to laugh at ridiculous stories, unless it became physically impossible. Wu Xiaocan quickly regained his composure and looked at me. He said my cellmates claimed I was some kind of fortune teller who predicted Wanda Wo's death. I remained perfectly calm under his gaze and asked him what he thought of that. I reminded him I only arrived last night and couldn't have known anyone here. Then I mentioned his father's name and his hometown, catching him completely off guard. Wu Xiaocan's temper flared, and he slammed his fist onto the table. He told me to drop the act, calling me social scum and threatening to break me. I stared back at him, my eyes deep in my face, showing absolutely no emotion. I looked right through him until he started to look visibly uncomfortable. The rest of the interrogation was purely routine, and I played my part. I told them I was sleeping and knew nothing about how Wanda Wo died. At dinner time, Wu Xiaocan returned to the cell block. He ordered the other 6 prisoners out to the mess hall, leaving me behind to talk. I let a small, expectant smile play on my lips as the others shuffled away. Once we were alone, he pulled out a lunchbox that was still steaming hot. I didn't say a word, just grabbed the chopsticks and started shoveling rice into my mouth. Wu Xiaoqin watched me in silence until I was nearly finished with the meal. He handed me a bottle of water, looking impatient as I took a long drink. He wanted proof that I actually knew what I was talking about. Predicting a heart attack wasn't enough. He needed to see something more. I looked at Wu Xiaoqin, sitting right across from me. I spoke softly, my voice cutting through the silence. You're 29, single, but you've been with your girlfriend for 6 years. He was clearly agonizing over his personal life every single day. Wu Xiaoqin had a mountain of complaints ready, but he swallowed them all at once. I told him exactly why his future mother-in-law had suddenly changed her mind. A relative introduced her to a middle manager at a big firm, someone better than him. That's why she demanded an extra 500,000. She wanted to force him to give up. My words hit him like a thunderbolt, leaving him frozen like a clay statue. I stood up and stretched, acting like a master giving a student a lesson. A real man doesn't cry easily, I said, giving him some room to breathe. I asked if he wanted me to make that dowry disappear and get him a free car to boot. Wu Xiaoqin grew cautious, telling me he didn't think I was the kind-hearted type. He wasn't willing to risk his career making shady deals with a prisoner. I chuckled and tapped the wall with my fingers, keeping my cool. I told him his part was simple, just go to my house and check on things. If the same thugs from months ago were involved, they'd be hunting for my property deed. If he found the place trashed, we'd know exactly who was responsible. After a long silence, Wu Xiaoqin finally agreed and asked for the plan. I saw the fish bite the hook and told him exactly where the police needed to raid tonight. Wu Xiaoqin's eyes widened in pure disbelief, clearly thinking I was unreliable. But after seeing the absolute conviction in my eyes, he finally nodded his head. I watched his figure gradually disappear down the hall. A meaningful smile spread across my face. The prison and the police station are different systems, but they share a lot of ground. Wu Xiaoqin has deep ties at the station, and a place like the Mahjong Hall is just a back alley dive. Sending a few officers for a surprise raid was as easy as saying a single sentence. The other inmates finished their dinner and returned one by one, keeping their distance from me. I didn't mind at all. In fact, I preferred the peace and quiet. Meanwhile, 3 uniformed officers arrived at the Good Luck Lobster restaurant. They saw the timing was right and kicked the locked door wide open. The scene that greeted them inside was enough to make anyone's eyes burn. Officer Wu, who was eating nearby, suddenly got a call on his cell phone. He put it on speaker and set it back down right in front of Wu Xiaoqin. How's it going over there? Wu Xiaoqin asked immediately. You need to get back here. Things are getting complicated. Hearing the officer's strained voice on the other end, Wu hung up the phone. Xiaoqin, move fast. This raid was your suggestion, after all. During the drive, they learned exactly what had been going down at the restaurant. By day, the old-timers gathered for mahjong, but by night, they were doing much more than playing games. Later that afternoon, the inmates were gathered for their scheduled exercise. Back at the station, the computer on the office desk was humming to life. It was connected to the interrogation room camera, broadcasting everything in real time. Wu Xiaoqin took one look at the screen and couldn't pull his eyes away. He couldn't believe the familiar figure he saw standing in the middle of that crowd. It was his own mother-in-law, the woman who always acted so stuck-up and called herself a high-class intellectual. Wu Xiaoqin knew she was trouble, but he never imagined she'd be caught in a place like that. Officer Wu noticed his partner's face turning pale and joked, "Wait, do you actually know her?" When Wu Xiaoqin nodded yes, the officer's expression shifted into something much more pitying. He reached out and gave Xiaoqin a heavy, sympathetic pat on the shoulder. Your mother-in-law still has some charm, I guess, but she really crossed the line this time. Of the 7 people we've interrogated so far, 6 of them are having long-term affairs with her. Wu Xiaoqin stood there, completely speechless, as his world started to crumble. Suddenly, the phone in his pocket began to vibrate. The caller ID read mother-in-law. He stared at the screen for a second before hanging up without a moment's hesitation. He knew exactly what I meant now. It wasn't the right time for him to step in and save her. He needed to let her rot in there a little longer to make sure the lesson really hit home. Over the next hour, his phone rang more than 10 times and dozens of messages flooded in. The tone of her texts shifted from arrogant demands to desperate, pathetic begging. I faked being out of breath and rushed to the detention room as soon as I reached the door. I had to make it look like I'd pulled 20 different favors just to get here. The moment my mother-in-law saw me, she burst into a desperate fit of sobbing. If the truth about tonight ever got out, she'd probably consider jumping off a building. Right now, I was her only lifeline. She was ready to cling to me no matter what it cost her. She had to keep me on her side at all costs. When I finally walked out of that interrogation room, I had a bright, satisfied smile plastered across my face. My mother-in-law followed behind me, her head hanging low in total shame. Just like I planned, she didn't just waive the $500 million bride price. She even threw in a $300,000 car to compensate me. She even insisted on covering every single cent of the wedding banquet expenses. Before leaving, I made sure Captain Wu would keep her little scandal under wraps. After all, we were going to be family soon, and I needed her reputation intact. She's currently divorcing my father-in-law, so I'm not sure how long the wedding will be delayed. I left the police station and drove straight over to your place. Following the address you gave me, I climbed the stairs to the top floor. I reached your apartment and found the front door standing slightly ajar. The house was a total wreck. Even the floor tiles had been ripped up, so I filmed a 1-minute video. The next morning, while I was on duty, Wu Xiaoqin pulled you out of the cell and looked you over. It was the same group of people from a few months ago who framed you. But they never would have guessed that you didn't keep anything valuable at home. You didn't care about objects that were so easy to lose. Seeing Wu Xiaoqin acting so polite, I felt a little bit of fear. He felt embarrassed that I was helping him so much. I knew that just recording a video wasn't going to be enough. I read his mind and said, if you feel bad about it, do me a favor. Buy me an incense burner and some sticks, and help me burn 3 of them every day. Do it in the guardroom, or the celestial beings will be displeased and things will go wrong. Even if I hadn't said it, his mother-in-law would have begged him to do it in 2 weeks anyway. Since you were already being mistaken for a fortune teller, I decided to lean into it. I used this moment to make you seem even more mysterious. Leave it to me, Wu Xiaoqin agreed instantly. He started burning 3 sticks of incense in the guardroom every single day. It was an easy task for him, and last night, he had even asked his friends about it. He learned that fortune-telling was a deeply mysterious profession. Rumor has it that some people worship a celestial being to get their information. Everything they know comes directly from that being's words. The more powerful the celestial being you worship, the more powerful the fortune teller becomes. He figured if I could commit a crime and still predict everything so accurately, especially his mother-in-law's actions, I had to be a master of my craft. I was clearly one of the best, so today, he hung on my every word. Wu Xiaoqin invited me to the guardroom, and we brewed a pot of tea together. There was no need to go to the cafeteria at noon, so he bought 2 staff meals. A standard serving of 2 meats and 3 vegetables with an ice-cold soda. In the corner of the guardhouse sat a small table with an incense burner. 3 sticks of incense were burning alongside offerings like fresh apples. I finished the last sip of tea from my cup and stood up slowly. I prepared to head back to my cell and say my goodbyes. At the door, I turned back silently and looked at Wu Xiaoqin. I told him in a calm tone, I can help you for free, just once. Consider it a thank you for these past few days. Wu Xiaoqin's eyes lit up instantly, and he celebrated in secret. He thought, my hard work wasn't in vain. This master is finally satisfied with my service. Back in my cell, I meditated with my eyes closed, fully aware of Wu Xiaoqin's plans. But before my strength arrived, I hadn't yet activated my true spirit. I lacked the power to protect myself in the face of real adversity. But after devouring 4 days of death energy in this prison, I finally have enough essence to awaken. I consulted the notes left in the forbidden area to begin the process. I knew the true spirit I awakened would depend on my current state of being. It all came down to my individual roots and my cultivation techniques. Those people hunting for the Earth's energy, they won't give up in this lifetime. They'll send invaders to this prison soon to force the location of that energy out of me. I immediately sat down on the floor with my legs crossed. My hands began weaving a series of complex, gray mudra signs. The surrounding death energy surged toward me like a rising tide. My 6 cellmates gradually noticed the shift and glanced over at me. They saw a young man sitting perfectly still in the corner. The moonlight shone through the window, illuminating my youthful face. My cellmates had been complaining nonstop lately. Ever since I arrived in this cell, they hadn't had a single night of peaceful sleep. I ignored their resentful glares and focused everything on the center of my brow. Every bit of essence I devoured over the last 4 days gathered at that single point. This was the key to awakening my true spirit. Inside my mind, it looked like a miniature lake, emitting a dark, chilling glow. Realizing the moment was ripe, I let out a silent roar in my heart. The lake between my brows ignited instantly, and the cell's temperature skyrocketed. Why is it suddenly so hot? It must be over 100 degrees in here. I feel like I'm being steamed alive. I can't take this. I refuse to stay in this prison, not for a single day more. This is the moment of truth. I snapped my eyes open. I stared directly at the flame. It was pulsating with raw power. The next second, everything shifted. Technically, I'm a prisoner on death row. But I'll ride a police car back to school just to see my father. I won't just kick the dean in front of the entire student body. I'll take the principal's microphone and announce his firing tomorrow. The 4 prison guards behind me stared at the sky, pretending they saw nothing. Meanwhile, my 6 cellmates watched me in secret, their breathing growing heavy. They panicked because they saw a cluster of zen-colored flames floating on my forehead. I kept my eyes wide, staring at that cluster of throbbing, painful fire. I thought to myself, the true spirit is the original function of life. It is the subtle matter that transforms into a myriad of things, the source of everything. I finally understood the true power of these zen-colored flames. Normally, the human skull is fragile. One small injury can turn you into a vegetable. But after awakening the true spirit, as long as it isn't extinguished, I can survive as a soul. Second, the key lies in tempering the body by guiding these zen-colored flames to any limb I choose. Most cultivators have weak physical bodies because they have to choose between magic and strength. But I'm different. As long as I have enough essence, these flames will temper my body 24 hours a day. As my realm improves, the flames will grow stronger until they harden every single inch of my skin. These flames are only the first stage of the true spirit. Soon, they will evolve into a divine furnace. I suddenly thought of Wukong trapped in the 8 trigrams furnace, forging his golden gaze. If I mimicked that process, would I achieve the same legendary effect? I decided to find out. With a single thought, I forced the cluster of essential flames directly into my right eye. The pain I expected never came. Instead, it felt like a dying man finally drinking fresh water. Every cell in my body began to dance with joy. How could my own true spirit cause me agony? With my true spirit finally awakened, I realized my body had undergone a massive transformation. I estimated that one punch could shatter this iron cell door and set all my cellmates free. These handcuffs and shackles felt like toys. I had to focus just to keep from snapping them. According to the ancient records, ordinary bullets wouldn't even be able to pierce my skin anymore. Then I remembered the book of life and death in my mind, radiating its ancient, bronze power. After testing my new strength, I turned my gaze toward my 6 cellmates to see their secrets. Before, I could only check one person at a time, but now I can read multiple souls at once. My range used to be limited to 1 meter, but now it has expanded to 5. And I can keep pushing that distance further as long as I feed it enough true essence. I could feel it. Seeing the past and future is only a fraction of what this book can do. The book of life and death is said to control destiny itself, and I know that power will be mine soon. In this vast world, there must be others with the ability to cultivate. I kept practicing until the first light of dawn began to fight against the darkness. A prison guard I didn't recognize blew his whistle to start the day. After finishing my luxury prison meal, I was taken to the guardroom. A guard sat nearby working in total silence, not saying a single word to me. He kept glancing at the door until Wu Shaoqin finally walked in with a dead serious expression. He dismissed his colleague, and a middle-aged man with a massive belly and graying hair walked in. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He looked like a desk jockey who lived with a permanent spare tire. Shaoqin stood behind him in silence while the big-bellied man stared at my calm face and steaming tea. He sat across from me but wouldn't touch the tea. He wasn't about to trust a death row inmate. He was trying to intimidate me, a small smirk playing on the corner of his mouth. "Do you even know who I am?" he asked. "Do you really dare to pull this stunt?" I looked him dead in the eye, completely unfazed. "It doesn't matter who you are," I said. "What matters is that I know what the deputy warden wants." I knew I was only getting this special treatment because the man in front of me stood to gain something. The smirk on Li Buotao's face froze as he glanced at the burning sandalwood in the corner. He realized I knew exactly who he was, Li Buotao. Hearing his name, Li Buotao suppressed a surge of internal ecstasy and leaned in. "What do you need?" he whispered. "I can't get you out. Your case is far too high profile for that." "The higher-ups are still watching," he said, "so you don't need to do anything." His words were meant to be a sedative, but I already had my own plan. I told Wu Shaoqin I'd help him once as thanks for his service these past few days. Standing behind the boss, Shaoqin nearly choked up with emotion when he heard me say that. The current warden of Yun City Prison was being transferred to the police bureau as director. That meant the top seat at this prison was officially up for grabs. Li Buotao is 51 this year, and this is his absolute last shot at the throne. If he doesn't move up now, he'll be sidelined until he rots in retirement as a mere deputy. But that wasn't even the part that had him losing sleep. The real problem was the other deputy warden, his bitter rival. They'd spent years sabotaging each other. Two tigers simply cannot share the same mountain. The other guy has 20 years on the job and a 90% chance of winning. Li Buotao knew that if his rival took the seat, his good life was over. He wouldn't just be sidelined. He'd likely be kicked out long before retirement. Wu Shaoqin is one of his loyalists, but even he had his own hidden agenda. He'd spent days playing the perfect lapdog for me, hoping to win my favor. It worked. I decided to give him some face in front of his boss. I set my teacup down and looked at Li Buotao, seeing the dark future waiting for him. "In the future I see, you lose the election," I said coldly. "Your rival wins, launches an investigation into you, and in a few months, you'll be a prisoner here. A life sentence for corruption and bribery." Li Buotao's tone shifted, sounding desperate now. "Thank you for the warning," he whispered. The decision was being made the day after tomorrow. He thought he'd just be fired, but he never expected his rival to be so ruthless. The man wouldn't leave any loose ends once he took power. And in this business, nobody's hands are truly clean. I took a slow sip of my tea and looked him in the eye. "You've spent years trying to win people over," I said. "But your rival has a better resume and more connections." He was banking entirely on the support of the outgoing warden. Li Buotao knew his position was weak and let out a bitter laugh. "I've begged the warden for help, but he won't get involved." The warden was a powerful man with a rock-solid background. He was headed for the center of power in Yun City with a bright future ahead. I stared directly into Li Buotao's eyes and cut to the chase. "The warden isn't helping because you haven't offered him anything he wants." Li Buotao's heart skipped a beat as he looked at me. His breathing grew heavy as he asked, "Can you get it for me?" I stayed silent while he stood up and nervously refilled my teacup. He leaned in low, refilling my empty cup with trembling hands. "You've spoken so much, young Zhao. You must be thirsty. Please, have some tea." My expression didn't flicker, but inside, my heart was racing like a Category 8 typhoon. It felt like a dream. Just last week, I was a death row inmate awaiting trial. Now, the deputy warden was serving me tea like a common waiter. I kept my face a mask of stone, knowing that the calmer I acted, the more untouchable I seemed. It's actually quite simple, I said, setting the cup down. The warden's son, Chun Yunchi, is spiraling into a toxic depression after a brutal breakup. He's tried to kill himself in the hospital multiple times already. The warden is on the verge of losing his only child. All you have to do is cure him. Li Buotao nearly jumped out of his seat, his eyes wide with shock. He knew the situation. Top psychologists from across the country had failed to make any progress. The warden hadn't even shown up to the prison in weeks, staying home to watch over his son. Do you know a specialist? Li Buotao asked, a world-class psychologist. He remembered I was a medical student at Junshin University. It made sense I'd have connections. I looked him dead in the eye and said, he's very close, right in front of you. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling, feeling the power shift entirely into my hands. Li Buotao froze, staring at me in disbelief. He thought I was joking. What did a fortune teller have to do with clinical psychology? But looking at my unwavering gaze, he began to wonder if I was worth the gamble. Risking his life and fortune on a death row inmate was a gamble he couldn't take lightly. What do I have to do? He asked, and I gave him the only answer. Set me free. I shrugged and added, or bring Chun Yunchi here. I can't heal him from a distance. Li Buotao knew I wasn't lying, but bringing the warden's son into a prison was impossible. The warden held supreme power here, and letting a condemned man out was a massive risk. If you run, we're both dead, he muttered, then turned and walked out to think. I sat alone until 7:20 p.m., while the other prisoners were distracted by the evening news. Nobody noticed a single police car quietly slipping away from the prison gates. I was in the back seat, my handcuffs gone, dressed in formal clothes and a white mask. Two elite guards sat on either side of me, their faces grim and professional. I could see the heavy bulges of handguns tucked into their waistbands. Their eyes never left me for a second, while Li Buotao sat in the front passenger seat. He had chosen his most trusted men for this mission, both armed with live ammunition. If I even looked like I was going to run, they had orders to kill me on the spot. Normally, a prisoner in transport would be shackled hand and foot. But Li Buotao had called the warden's wife, claiming he'd found a world-class specialist. Showing up with a doctor in chains would have ruined the entire lie. I didn't say a word, simply staring out the window of the police cruiser. I focused on the passing scenery, thinking about how quickly my fate had shifted. Just days ago, I was framed and locked away. Now, I was breathing the air of the outside world. I was a man on death row, yet here I was, taking a massive step forward. I was one step closer to true freedom. We arrived at a luxury neighborhood where every entrance required facial recognition. Security guards patrolled 24/7, and even delivery drivers were barred from entering. The warden, Chen Xiao, lived in total isolation here. Not even his neighbors knew a high-ranking official lived right between them. Once the police cruiser cleared the prison grounds, we swapped it for two nondescript vans. Li Buotao had insisted on discretion. We couldn't roll into this neighborhood in a squad car. The two guards climbed into the van with me, never lowering their guard for a second. To them, I was a monster who had killed 7 people, an unimaginable disaster if I escaped. I looked at Li Buotao in the passenger seat and said, don't be so nervous. I remained perfectly calm as I added, give me a bank card I can use. Don't be stingy, I told him. I know your secret account is loaded. Li Buotao's face went pale at my words. He didn't know what I was plotting, but he pulled a card from his wallet and handed it over. The van pulled into the complex and stopped in front of the warden's building. The armed guard stayed in the car, watching as Li Buotao and I took the elevator up. It was one apartment per floor. Li Buotao knocked on the dark red door, his hands trembling. If anyone found out he brought a death row inmate to pose as the warden's son's doctor, he was finished. A woman in simple clothes hurried to the door and let us inside. The warden never brought his wife, Deng Panwan, to events, so this was Li Buotao's first time meeting her. Deng Panwan was over 40 years old and no longer in her youth. She didn't spend her time on vanity. There was no expensive makeup on her face and no jewelry to be seen. Unlike other high-ranking officials' wives who loved to gamble, she seemed much more grounded. She greeted us warmly, but the exhaustion in her eyes showed she was at her breaking point. She mentioned she hadn't been sleeping well lately, while Chen Xiao sat on the sofa, motionless. Standing over 6 feet tall, he looked imposing even while sitting down. His gaze was fixed on me, the man he knew only as Dr. Zhao, at around 4 p.m. Li Buotao had called him earlier, claiming he knew a top-tier psychologist who had cured many patients. He told the warden I was leaving to study abroad next week and might not return for years. Chen Xiao initially thought it was best to refuse, especially during such a crucial election period. But Li Buotao swore on his life that this doctor could cure the warden's son, Chun Yunchi. Li Buotao even offered to resign if I failed, which finally moved Chen Xiao to agree. Hope flickered in their hearts, but they looked at me with clear doubt. Even with my mask on, they could tell I was barely in my 20s. I could see the warden thinking, is this kid really a doctor, or just some student Li Buotao found? Where is the patient? I asked, keeping my voice professional. My time is limited and my flight leaves tomorrow, so I need to begin the treatment immediately. Chen Xiao stood up like an iron tower, looming over me, and asked which hospital I was from. Watching this unfold, Li Buotao felt like he was about to suffocate. He didn't expect Chen Xiao to start interrogating me like this. This was an unexpected turn that could ruin everything. If I couldn't give a straight answer, we were both dead. I looked him in the eye and said, I'm 21 years old. My mentor is the great Chen Gyufin. I only have 1 year of clinical experience, but I have never failed a case. I answered the warden's pressure with cold, unwavering respect. I remained perfectly calm, acting like a man who truly had a flight to catch. I added, I didn't want to take on a difficult patient right before leaving. If you don't trust me because of my age, I'll happily go back to my hotel and rest. I turned around to leave without a second thought. Chen Xiao panicked instantly when he heard the name of my supposed mentor. The doubt in his eyes vanished, and he practically jogged to get in front of me. He looked at me with total sincerity and said, I am deeply sorry for my behavior. I apologize solemnly. Please, do not hold this against my family. Please, cure my son, he begged, as Deng Panwan stood by trembling with anxiety. If Li Buotao wasn't watching, they probably would have dropped to their knees right there. In the world of psychology, the name Chen Gyufin is treated like a god. Even for billionaires, getting an appointment with one of his disciples is nearly impossible. A man like the warden of Yinshan prison usually doesn't have that kind of pull. He isn't a big enough figure to move someone of that stature. Even Chen Gyufin's disciples are world-renowned legends. The most powerful families in the country treat them like royalty. In the provincial capital, nobody would ever dare to fake that connection. Li Buotao stood behind me in silence, his entire gaze shifting in shock. He couldn't believe I was seizing the opportunity like this. I was actually daring to pose as a disciple of the great Chen Gyufin. My acting was flawless as I hesitated for a moment, then finally nodded and asked, Where is the patient? Chen Xiao and Deng Panwan beamed with relief and said, Our son is in the room on the left. He hasn't left that room in 3 months. He's nothing but skin and bones. He gets violent when he sees strangers, so please, be careful. They scrambled to give me every detail about Chen Jun to ensure my success. I simply said, I understand, and walked toward the bedroom with long, confident strides. The moment my back was turned to them, the corners of my mouth curled into a smirk. On the way here, I had a sudden flash of inspiration regarding my new power. I realized a new way to use the Book of Life and Death. Even if the book can't explicitly show me every detail of a person's future, every word I speak and every small decision I make will subtly rewrite the destiny of everyone around me. As the warden of Yinshan prison, he definitely wouldn't trust a total stranger easily. So, the moment I stepped into the living room, I put my plan into motion. I used the Book of Life and Death to predict exactly how Chen Xiao would react. I watched the ripples my words created in his future. To an ordinary fortune teller, the future is a blur, shifting with every choice a person makes. It's a mess of variables and mysteries, which is why they speak in riddles. They stay vague just to dodge the blame when they're wrong, but I'm different. The future I see through the Book of Life and Death is an absolute certainty. It's like finding a loophole in reality itself. I saw his future before it even happened. After testing the possibilities in my mind, I reached a final conclusion. By claiming to be Chen Gyufin's disciple, I could erase every seed of doubt in Chen Xiao's heart. I stepped into the bedroom and casually shut the door, leaving Chen Xiao and Deng Panwan pacing outside. They were incredibly restless, having seen 90% of the psychologists they hired flee within a minute. Their son's rage had driven everyone away, and they feared the worst. If even the great disciple was powerless, they would truly lose all hope. But the explosion they expected never came, and even Li Buotao breathed a secret sigh of relief. I wasn't lying. I really can cure mental illness, and after 6 minutes, I walked back out with the boy. Ignoring his parents, the boy followed me closely as I said, I'm taking him for the night. I promised them, tomorrow, I will return a healthy son to you. Without another word, I led the now obedient Chen Jun into the elevator and left the building. I left Chen Xiao and Deng Panwan standing there, stunned by what they just saw. Even Li Buotao, who had been silent for a long time, couldn't hide his shock. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead as he realized a death row inmate was just walking away. Damn it, I was actually walking out with the warden's own son. Chapter 9, The Breakout. A high school heartbreak is nothing compared to the royal treatment I was giving Chen Jun now. The moment I stepped out the door, I acted like I didn't even know the guards were there. I led Chen Jun right past the 4 undercover agents and headed toward the community entrance. They panicked, whispering, Why is he taking the boy out? This wasn't part of the plan. What do we do? The boss hasn't sent a signal yet. Should we open fire? Are you insane? The young master is right behind him. Do you want to kill him? Just follow them. The 4 of them quickly made their move. They decided to tail me and Chen Jun from a distance. But even though I was walking slowly, every time they closed the gap to 5 meters, they would lose sight of me for no reason at all. One moment, I was behind an illegally parked car. The next, I was standing among a group of seniors playing cards. I stayed perfectly positioned in their visual blind spots. By the time they realized what was happening, I had already analyzed every move they could make. They had gone too far. In the end, all they could do was stare. It was powerful. Everything was calculated within the blind spots of those 4 men. By the time they realized it, I was already long gone. They watched helplessly as I and Chen Jun hopped into a taxi and vanished. We made a clean getaway. Sitting in the passenger seat, I watched them. I saw those 4 haggard figures in the rearview mirror and remembered a movie from high school. The protagonist could see his own future 2.5 minutes ahead. He tricked a group of thugs, and now I can do the same thing even better than him. The taxi pulled up to the entrance of Oriental City, and the driver looked at me with a grin. "Kid, you've got good taste," he said. This was the most exclusive entertainment venue in the entire Yinshan district. Located in the heart of the city where land is worth its weight in gold, it's the size of 3 football fields. With the neon lights humming, it looked like a city that never sleeps, filled with girls like goddesses. Urban beauties, pure students, exotic vibes, and charming mature women. The boss here has the best stock. They even host massive concerts with stars like the pop idol Lin Yuru closing the show last year. Rumor has it there's a secret casino floor inside, but I didn't say a word as I led Chen Jun toward the entrance. 2 waitresses in light blue suits stood by the bronze revolving doors, showing just enough skin to be provocative. Their legs were wrapped in black stockings, but I didn't even blink as I walked into the massive lobby. It felt like stepping into a palace, the floors polished to a mirror shine, as a manager in a suit came jogging over. I looked at the manager and said, "Open a luxury suite for us, and call 10 of your top girls to get the party started. And bring those 2 waitresses from the front door in here as well." The manager hesitated, stuttering that luxury suites were reserved for gold members only. I didn't blink. "I'm a friend of your boss. If you don't believe me, call him." The manager eyed us skeptically, clearly doubting that 2 students could know the owner of Oriental City. Still, he pulled out his phone and made the call with his back turned to us. After a few words, he handed the phone to me, and I finished the conversation in less than a minute. The manager spoke to Boss Chen one last time, and suddenly, his entire demeanor shifted to pure respect. He apologized profusely and led us straight to luxury suite number 5 with a 60% discount. The room was 3 times the size of a high school classroom, dripping in gold paint and plush red carpets. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, creating a blinding display of wealth. Minutes later, 30 young women in various uniforms lined up in front of us, their perfume filling the air. The sight was enough to make anyone's head spin. To make up for his earlier mistake, the manager had called in every top-tier girl available. Chen Jun, who hadn't said a word, stared with wide eyes as his breathing turned heavy and chaotic. I leaned in and whispered, "High school heartbreak is nothing. Tonight, I'm letting you live like an emperor." I patted his shoulder, feeling like I was opening Pandora's box for him. Every single woman in this room was now at his beck and call. "If you aren't satisfied, we'll keep calling more until you find one you like." I walked out of the suite, leaving Chen Jun behind, knowing that a sickness of the heart needs a strong cure. And right now, a sexy, mature club girl is exactly the medicine Chen Jun needs to cure his heartache. I checked the time, 9:45 p.m., and realized I wouldn't be able to cultivate tonight. I headed back to the lobby, found a quiet corner to rest, and began reflecting on my future path. The Book of Life and Death contained too many supernatural powers and ancient laws from 100-star worlds, but most had major flaws, requiring specific spirit bones or a mountain of rare resources to even start. I applied a filter to the list, and the options instantly dropped to 68,000 types. Eventually, I narrowed it down to 2, the Emperor Ming Sutra and the Creation Heart Sutra. The Emperor Ming Sutra originated 20 million years ago from a simple cowherd on an ancient life star. He had stumbled upon a black metal page and deciphered 99 divine symbols. By mastering them, he dominated an entire era and lived for 20,000 years before passing. The Immortal Immolation Sutra is for healing, while the Emperor Ming Sutra is for destruction. Normally, these 2 paths would clash and restrict each other. But I knew the Book of Life and Death wouldn't suggest methods that would sabotage my progress. It wanted me to combine them, allowing both paths to sublimate into something greater. The origin of the Creation Heart Sutra was even more mysterious, dating back to the Desolate Valley era. By practicing this method, I could create anything. Whatever I painted would manifest out of thin air. The more people believed in the creation, the more power it would exert over reality. I had lied to Wu Shaokan and Li Boitao about worshipping an ancestor to explain my foresight. Back then it was just a cover story, but soon, I'll actually be able to paint destiny into existence. I've already decided what to paint first, but the implications are so shocking I need to investigate further. I need to cultivate a direct lineage of followers to handle the grunt work. Otherwise, even if I could clone myself, I'd never be able to keep up with everything. Just then, a man wearing a mask entered the lobby and flashed a memory card. A waiter in a flashy uniform immediately led him toward a restricted area. I snapped my eyes open, a look of genuine surprise crossing my face. It was an old acquaintance of mine, and apparently, he was a regular here. Ever since my true spirit awakened, my 5 senses had reached superhuman levels. The golden flame flickered in my eyes, granting me a subtle form of X-ray vision. Even with his mask and sunglasses, I recognized him instantly. Well, this just got a lot more interesting, I whispered to myself. I tracked where he went and quietly swiped a master key card from the manager. Pulling off a petty theft like this was child's play for me now. I took the elevator up to the 48th floor, where the presidential suites are located. These rooms offer a panoramic view of half the city and total privacy for the elite. I reached room number 5 and swiped the card across the electronic lock. The door opened with a soft click, and I stepped inside with total confidence. The bedroom was massive, dominated by a gaudy, oversized round bed. A balding, middle-aged man, naked and looking like a pale pig, was huffing and puffing. He was busy exerting himself on top of a blonde, blue-eyed woman. I pulled out my phone, snapped a few photos, and started recording the show. "You were sentenced to death in Yunshin prison. How the hell are you here?" His eyes darted down, locking onto the phone in my hand. Cold sweat began to bead across his forehead. He was clearly struggling to keep his voice steady. "Don't do anything stupid, kid. Just behave yourself back in prison. A death sentence can always be commuted to life in prison. I always thought you were a star student. I was so sad I didn't eat for 2 days when I heard the news. Cooperate with me, and I'll make sure you're out in 20 years with a future ahead of you." Desperate to make me delete the evidence, he started making wild promises with a cracking voice. Did he really expect me to believe he was just learning a foreign language with this woman? I knew exactly who he was. The man was a legend among the students. At every annual award ceremony, I was always the one standing center stage. As the rector of Yunshin University, he had personally handed me my prize money and flowers. But our history was anything but harmonious. My Chinese medicine department kept a small herb garden on the back mountain for our studies. Back in May, some punks from the finance department started ripping up our herbs like they were weeds. I caught them while I was out feeding a stray cat and tried to talk sense into them. When negotiations failed, those finance idiots decided to get physical. I ended up putting every single one of them in the hospital, including their leader, Nguyen. Ong's family ran a 3-star hotel, and they weren't about to let a loss like that slide. They used their family's influence to pressure the university. In the end, I was forced to take the entire fall. The head of the Chinese medicine department took a bribe to look the other way. The rector followed suit, turning a blind eye to the injustice. He slapped a major disciplinary mark on my permanent record and delayed my graduation by a year. A black mark like that on your record is a life sentence in the professional world. It meant I'd be entering society as a failure, forever at a disadvantage when looking for work. I looked at Rector Wan, who was now as tense as a pulled bowstring. I smiled and asked, "If I sent this evidence back home, what would you do?" I knew all about his tigress of a wife back in the city. Would she really believe he was just learning a foreign language with this blonde beauty? The rector started as a nobody in the system. When he was young, he used his looks to seduce a wealthy woman with massive connections. He didn't hesitate to become a live-in son-in-law just to climb to the top of Yunshin University. If that tigress found out what he was doing here, he'd be packed up and kicked to the curb by morning. "What the hell do you want?" Wan growled, trying to look fierce. But even a child could see he was bluffing through his teeth. My smile didn't fade as I told him I just wanted to say hello to my old rector and pass a message to my classmate, Chu Wanqi. I added, "Tell her I'm doing just fine." Without giving him a chance to respond, I turned and walked out of the presidential suite. He might realize something is fishy, but then his eyes drift back to the blonde woman. Rector Wan's lust flares up again as he pushes her back down onto the bed. He thinks to himself, "Damn it, even if I die tomorrow, I'm going to enjoy tonight." I step out of the presidential suite, hearing Wan's vigorous gasps behind the door. The smirk on my face widens as I head back down to the hotel lobby. I find a spot, close my eyes, and take a quick nap while I wait. It isn't until dawn that Chen Yunqi finally stumbles out of his private room. He clearly hasn't slept a wink, swaying on his feet like he might collapse at any second. But his eyes are bright, glowing like an owl in the dead of night. He looks like he's on a high, a completely different person from the wreck I saw yesterday. He spots me in the lobby and runs over, so excited he can barely speak clearly. "From now on, you're my big brother," he shouts. "I've realized I need to make serious money. I'm going to work hard so I can come back here every single day. Every girl in there was 100 times hotter than the ex who dumped me." I look at Chen Yunqi as he rambles on without stopping for breath. I reach into my pocket and hand him a platinum membership card. "I got this for you," I tell him. "There's 1,000,000 yuan on it. As long as you study hard, I'll make sure the balance never runs out." I'm spending Li Buotao's money, of course. A prison deputy director won't miss 1,000,000. Chen Yunqi's eyes practically sparkle as he snatches the platinum card from my hand. He rushes over and kisses the card passionately for a good 30 seconds. He tucks it away carefully, knowing exactly how his father, Chen Xiao, would react. If the old man knew he'd been at the Dongfang Club, he'd probably kill his own son for the sake of justice. I lead Chen Yunqi out of the club and hail a random taxi back to the high-end community. The moment we open the door and step inside, we see 3 people waiting in the living room. It's clear none of them have slept a wink all night either. Li Buotao, my little spy, looks especially rough. He's been on the verge of a total breakdown ever since I took Chen Yunqi out. As my guarantor, he couldn't leave. He was stuck here, forced to wait and worry. Every minute was pure torture for him, fearing I'd go rogue and take the boy hostage. If I had vanished, he wouldn't just lose his job as deputy director, he'd be a national disgrace. He looks relieved to see us, but then he catches a glimpse of Chen Yunqi's face and nearly jumps. The boy doesn't look cured at all. In fact, his condition looks 10 times worse than yesterday. Chen Xiao stares at his son, who has been out all night and looks like he's been run over by a truck. He frowns, ready to demand an explanation from Master Gu's talented disciple for this mess. But before he can speak, his son runs straight to his mother with a pained expression. "Mom, is there any food in the house?" he groans. "I'm starving to death. I think I'm malnourished after that battle last night." It's a miracle he didn't faint the second he stepped through the front door. Chen Xiao freezes, stunned to hear his son actually asking for food on his own initiative. His mother's eyes welled up with tears of pure relief. She was overwhelmed with emotion seeing him like this. "Thank you for saving my son," she whispered. Chen Xiao looked at me and promised, "In Yunshin, you only have to ask for what you need." Li Buitao watched from the side, his expression a tangled mess of nerves. I wondered how Chen Xiao would react if he knew I was actually a death row inmate. Since the patient was fine, I decided it was time to stop bothering them. Deng Jingyan and Chen Xiao tried to convince me to stay for breakfast. I turned them down, using the excuse that I had a flight to catch. If I stayed and took off my mask, they'd recognize me instantly. As we left the luxury complex, Li Buitao couldn't hide the calculating glint in his eyes. He had just finished a private chat with Chen Xiao. The big man had hinted at helping him secure the prison director position at tomorrow's conference. The car ride back felt different now that we were back in a police vehicle. The 4 officers in uniform glared at me with pure resentment. They were terrified I'd vanish from their sight the second they blinked. Yesterday's chaos was still fresh in their minds, but Li Buitao was in a great mood. He hummed a tune and turned to look at me in the back seat. "That method you used to cure Chen Yunxi," he asked, full of curiosity. "Was that really just some trick you learned from Master Gu Yufeng?" I thought back to everything that happened yesterday. Li Buitao held his breath as he waited for my answer. His face shifted from doubt to confusion, then to a sudden, sharp realization. When he looked at me again, his eyes were overflowing with pure shock. He knew the money spent at Dongfang City came directly from his own pocket. If Chen Xiao decided to blame him for the boy's behavior, he was finished. I watched Li Buitao's body tremble slightly as I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen a few times and calmly handed it over to him. The screen showed a video of Chen Yunxi partying with several women in a private VIP box. I had recorded it from a very clever, hidden angle. Every face in that room was captured clearly on camera. Li Buitao understood my message instantly, and a look of pure dread washed over him. For a man like Chen Xiao who guarded his political reputation, this video was a death sentence. If the truth came out, that million-yuan membership card would destroy Li Buitao's entire career. He realized I held his life in my hands, and his arrogant posture collapsed. Suddenly, the way Li Buitao looked at me became sickeningly cheerful. He completely dropped his act as the high and mighty prison director. "You must be starving after all that work, right?" he asked with a fake smile. "I know a great restaurant nearby. Why don't we grab a bite before we head back?" I leaned my head back and told him I didn't trust outside food. I leaned against the car window and told him to head to Yunshin University. I needed to pick something up from there before we returned to the prison. The guards looked at each other, thinking my refusal of restaurant food was actually reasonable. They knew outside places used cheap oil, while prison food was at least hygienic. Li Buitao gave the security guard a quick excuse at the gate. The police car drove straight onto the campus grounds. My destination was the medicinal herb garden at the back of the school. It was a remote area, far from the main buildings. Usually, only Chinese medicine students went there, and it was currently summer break. The chances of running into anyone I knew were incredibly low. Yunshin University was filled with buildings blending Chinese and Western styles. As we drove in, I could feel the heavy, academic atmosphere of the place. It was a century-old institution surrounded by lush, green trees. Since it was nearly lunchtime, students were walking back and forth across the paths. The police car drew some stairs, but no one recognized me inside. We finally arrived at the herb garden exclusive to the Department of Chinese Medicine. The medicinal plants inside were growing vigorously in their designated plots. Each section had an independent label with a student's name written on it. These were all graduation projects for this year's senior class. The most prominent plot of all bore my own name, Zhao Yi. A rustle came from the nearby bushes, followed by 2 small figures. One was pure white, and the other was pitch black. They trotted over with ease. They rubbed their heads against my pants. They were just stray cats. I had adopted them months ago when they were just kittens. The white one was like snow, the black one like ink, both with fur as soft as silk. They were like little spirits walking the earth, incredibly intelligent. They understood almost everything I said. I named them Siri and Baiyao. They were quite dominant little things. To keep them safe from cruel students, I took full responsibility for their care and feeding. They usually hid in the bushes the moment they heard a stranger approaching. I've been locked up for so long, so why haven't they lost weight? In fact, they looked even fatter than before. I looked at the cat feeder hidden in the dense brush and saw it was still full of food. A memory gradually surfaced in my mind. It was a memory of pure, despicable intent from back in May. Li Razi, a student from the finance department, had been relentlessly pursuing my classmate, Wan and I. Wan and I was mute from birth and came from a poor family in the mountains. She relied entirely on student loans to pay her tuition. Li Razi figured if he destroyed her graduation project, she would fail to graduate. I told them to get lost immediately, but Li Razi just screamed at me to stay out of it. He tried to use his numbers to teach me a lesson, but I ended up putting both of them straight into the hospital. My relationship with Wan and I has always been great. Back in our third year, I even thought about starting a business with her after graduation. But on the day of my sentencing, she didn't show up. Juan and I was the only other person who knew about these kittens. Usually, when I didn't have time, she would come by to help me look after them. Even though she's graduated and left school, it seems she still comes back often to feed them. But I have to put a stop to it, or they'll both end up as fat as little balls. I pulled a cardboard box out of the trunk and watched the two kittens playing at my feet. I crouched down and asked them seriously, "I won't be coming back here anymore. Do you want to come with me?" The two of them gradually stopped playing. They tilted their heads, looked at me for a moment, and then made their move. They hopped obediently into the cardboard box. I handed them over to you. Li Buotao stood beside her, mouth agape. It was his first time seeing this. He had never seen animals with such a spiritual connection. "Wait for me a moment," I said, a sinister smile creeping across my face. I grabbed a small iron shovel from the nearby storage room. Under the puzzled gazes of the group, I walked toward the garden. I headed straight for the patch of Chinese medicinal herbs that I had planted and cultivated myself. It was just like the one the police used. Just as I was about to make my move, I stopped. I looked straight into the camera with a strange, piercing gaze. It was as if I were waiting for something specific to happen. 30 seconds later, a man in a suit and leather shoes appeared, followed by 10 students. They came charging toward me, clearly unhappy about my presence. The man in the suit was in his 30s, wearing thin, black-rimmed glasses. But he had a thick layer of bandages wrapped around his head. He had a faint, smug smile on his face that felt completely out of place. "I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me," he said, "but it really is you, Zhaoyi." The students behind him looked shocked. They all knew I had been sentenced to death. My enrollment at Yunshan University had been canceled long ago. They wondered how a death row inmate could just walk back onto campus. I looked at Director Liu and smiled, thinking about how dedicated he was. Inside, I thought, if I'd known you'd be back so soon, I would have hit you harder. Last month, this man took bribes to ensure my expulsion and harsh sentencing. But I wasn't someone he could just bully without consequences. A week after my sentencing, I caught him in a dark alley without cameras and cracked his skull with a club. His smile vanished instantly, and I could hear him grinding his teeth in pure hatred. "So it was you," he hissed, remembering the night the police dismissed his claims for lack of evidence. He just had to swallow that bitter pill while looking at his father. Director Liu's face turned bright red as my smile only grew wider. I opened my mouth and let out a ruthless insult that left him stunned. It took him a moment to react, his entire body trembling with pure rage. With so many students watching, he couldn't hide his embarrassment and resorted to a sneer. "You were a student here once," he spat. "Why act like a primitive savage?" I shrugged and kept my tone perfectly innocent. "You need evidence for claims like that, Director. Defamation is illegal, you know." He laughed in my face, asking where he'd find evidence in a dump like this. I walked up to him and kicked him so hard he flew 5 meters back. "Still no evidence?" I asked. "Aren't you just accusing an innocent man?" If I didn't give him a reason to fear me today, he'd think he owned the school. Last month, he dismissed my defense with one word: evidence. Now, the tables had turned, and I was the one in control of this canyon. The kick nearly killed him. He was dizzy, vomiting, and could barely see straight. I trotted over and buried another punch deep into his stomach. The pain hit him right in the marrow, making his eyes bulge like a cooked shrimp. I was holding back my true spirit realm strength, or his head would have popped. The students watching the show were absolutely dumbfounded by the brutality. They wanted to stop me, but one look at my power made them back away in fear. I pretended not to see a thing while Director Liu reached his breaking point, spitting out 4 or 5 loose teeth. His son, Li Buotao, could only stand by and stare at the sky as I beat his father for 6 straight minutes in front of a massive crowd. Suddenly, the school principal came charging in, huffing and puffing with a squad of baton-wielding security guards. He couldn't even see through the wall of students, so he just screamed at the top of his lungs for everyone to disperse. As the crowd parted, the principal saw me using the director of Chinese medicine as my personal footstool. I was just staring up at the sky, lost in thought. When Director Liu saw the principal arrive, his tears started flowing even harder. He was overwhelmed with emotion, certain that if no one intervened, I was actually going to kill him. To him, the principal looked like a divine being shining under the morning sun. The principal took a breath of relief and then shouted with righteous authority, "Apologize." Director Liu managed a weak smile that looked uglier than a sobbing mess. But the principal's very next sentence pushed him over the edge, and he blacked out instantly. "Liu Changda, I demand that you explain this situation. Apologize to him, quickly," the principal barked, leaving the students and Yujin completely stunned. Li Buotao was ready to negotiate, but the principal's arrival became the final straw for his father. The principal's timing wasn't an accident. He had been in Dongfang City until dawn dealing with that tigress from Nanshan. The moment he stepped through the school gates, he heard the news. He heard that I, a man sentenced to death, was at the herb field, and he knew Director Liu was heading there to cause trouble. He had sprinted to the field with security, his soul practically leaving his body from the stress. But seeing that I wasn't the one at a disadvantage, his worried heart finally settled. The principal thought, as long as this master isn't the one losing, everything is fine. He ordered a few students to escort the broken Director Liu to the hospital immediately. After dispersing the crowd, he approached me with a warm, respectful smile. Yunshin University is your home, he said. You are welcome here anytime. I didn't bother with polite small talk. I had work to do. I left that old fox to deal with Lu Buitao and walked back to my herb field alone. I looked at my graduation project, moved half a meter to the side, and started digging. Half a meter down, my shovel hit something solid, an ancient red sandalwood box. Inside was the earth essence of Mount Fulong, the treasure that started it all. They say an ordinary man is innocent until he carries a jade treasure. Then, it's a sin. I never expected this little gadget would be the thing to flip my entire destiny upside down. I felt a surge of emotion as I solemnly tucked the sandalwood box away. I sat in the back of the police car and looked at the cardboard box beside me. Inside, the kittens, Bai and Rio, were curled up asleep against each other. Sensing my presence, their breathing steadied and they began to purr softly. I looked at the notebook recording their retail sales and realized their potential. Their natural roots were even better than I expected. With training, they'd be invaluable. I looked at Lu Buitao in the driver's seat and gave him an order. One more stop at the pet store, I said. I need supplies and some offerings for the ancestors. Lu Buitao nodded seriously as I prepared to return to the one place I called home, prison. As sunset approached, the prison looked like it was wrapped in dark clouds. Even with the sun shining, the place felt suffocating from a distance. I narrowed my eyes, and two invisible rays of golden light shot from my pupils. I could see it clearly now. Junshin Prison was truly a strange place. A thick, extraordinary energy was seeping up from deep underground. It lingered in the air, refusing to dissipate. The longer a person stayed inside, the more their soul would be eroded. The guards were fine since they went home, but the prisoners went mad by the hundreds. I used to be blind to it, but with my cultivation, I saw the truth at a glance. What a beautiful place, I whispered, my eyes gleaming with pure joy. This energy is poison to most, but to me, it's the ultimate tonic. My path uses the world as a furnace to refine everything into original essence. In this barren world, a place like this is an incredibly rare treasure. One day of cultivation here is worth half a month anywhere else. Even if they open the gates now, I wouldn't dream of leaving. The bastard who framed me and threw me in here never expected this. He thought he was ruining me, but he accidentally handed me the chance of a lifetime. While the other inmates lined up for dinner, Lu Buitao led me into a private room. It was an elaborate office, decked out with high-quality rosewood furniture and fine tea sets. Lu Buitao dropped the act and bowed, saying, "My office is simple. Please make yourself at home. Let's settle for eating here tonight. I've already told the kitchen to prepare something special. The flavor is just as good as any five-star hotel." He explained that Junshin Prison has its own private garden, tended by the inmates. It's reserved exclusively for the high-ranking officials. I nodded and turned my gaze toward the jars and canisters in his kitchen cabinet. "The tea you usually drink isn't bad," I remarked with a serious face. "Every bottle in there is enough to add another year to your prison sentence." I thought about the ancient tea trees back on Funyo Mountain, passed down by my ancestors. They must be 100 years old by now, but the soil there is far too poor. Even with constant care, you can barely keep them from withering away. Lu Buitao's face flushed as he realized I could tell his collection was worth a fortune. "I don't have many hobbies at my age," he stammered, trying to play it off. "Young Master Zhao, you're clearly an expert. Please, take whatever you like from the cabinet. I have plenty more of this stuff at home anyway." He quickly changed the subject, his voice dripping with gratitude. "I've already sent someone to prepare a private cell for you to settle in for now. Once Warden Chen's office is vacated, I'll redecorate it to look like a presidential suite. As long as you're in this prison, you can go wherever you want." Lu Buitao was an old fox. He knew serving me was more important than any regulation. I didn't bother being polite. I grabbed a bottle of high-quality Longjing and started brewing. The teapot was made of purple clay and released a faint, elegant fragrance. The tea hit my tongue smooth and pure. It was actually a top-tier brew. Dinner was a massive feast with 18 different dishes laid out. To keep things lively, Lu Buitao brought in his trusted men like Shao Kan. He even transferred over some fresh female graduates from the police academy. They were from the women's prison wing, all with great looks and figures. The high-quality rosewood table was packed, and the atmosphere grew warm. Halfway through the meal, the pace of the serving slowed down as the alcohol kicked in. Everyone's tongues started to loosen up with the wine. Lu Buitao looked at me, his face flushed, and carefully weighed his words. "Brother Zhao, I'm curious about something, if you don't mind me asking. A powerful man like you, what kind of woman couldn't you have? I mean, why would someone like you end up here for a crime like that?" He was referring to the news reports, but he was clearly holding back his true thoughts. He knew that if I wanted, I could have any of the waitresses in my bed tonight. I was a top student from Junshin University and clearly no pervert. No matter how he looked at it, my situation didn't make any sense. "You probably guessed it already, right?" I said, finally setting down my chopsticks. I was framed. I looked at their shocked expressions and let out a cold, thin smile. The temperature in the office suddenly plummeted. The hair on the back of a dozen necks stood straight up. A ghostly wind seemed to howl in their ears as they stared at me. They hung on to my every word, but one phrase hit them the hardest: hell. To most, hell is just a vague legend or a ghost story. There was no concrete proof to back up what I was saying, but the sheer weight of my words shattered their perception of reality. These men were already familiar with the concept of celestial beings. Folk legends about spirits are popular in many regions, especially the Northeast. Whether they were benevolent ghosts or animals cultivating the Tao, they had heard it all. But a celestial being who could actually work in hell? How powerful would that be? I looked at their faces and knew I had achieved my goal. I had created a massive persona for myself, a celestial figure they couldn't ignore. Even if they had doubts, the fear was enough to keep them from crossing me. The dinner finally dragged to an end in the early hours of the morning. I stretched my arms and stepped out of the office, following Shao Kahn. I made sure to take all the premium tea from the cabinet with me. Giving top-tier tea to a man like Lu Buitao would have been a total waste. Shao Kahn led the way with a flattering smile, bowing as he spoke. He explained that they had converted the guard room into a private cell just for me. I gave a casual shrug, feeling like it didn't really matter where I stayed. I didn't even need a private room when cell 56 had quilts folded as tight as tofu blocks. The discipline in there was more professional than a group of army veterans. But I pushed those thoughts aside because I had much more important work to do now. I prepared to use the heart of creation to draw the vision I'd been holding in my mind. Chapter 14, The Horse-Faced Rakshasa, Judge of Sins. Using the heart of creation, I treated the vast world itself as my desk. With my essence as the paper and my mental power as the paint, I wondered what I could achieve.